Welcome, everybody, to our community of practice. Thank you to Goodnews Cadogan for agreeing to come and share with us today. Good News influences leaders to develop values and beliefs that build a solid values-based framework, a reference and guide for their strategic conversations and transformation initiatives. He derives pleasure from working with clients, developing resilient strategic foresight through transformative narrative. Advocating for the chosen values and influencing outcomes is the major driver of his efforts as a value curator. Good News began by developing the capability to diagnose and problem solve with very narrow margin for creativity. I've learned that answers are no longer obvious and the margin of error can be disastrous if I do not work with the benefit of collective probity, which is in quotation marks. So Good News and Ingrid, over to you.
No.
Thank you very much.
Good news.
Yes. Born in Port Elizabeth, now called Ikabeja. It was such a wonderful thing to grow up in the dusty streets of KwaZulu Township in Port Elizabeth. Learning to be awakening and sometimes moving onto the farm in Bedford, just outside, 2 hours outside Port Elizabeth, on a farm where my mother was born. And then further moving into various roles in life, as a father to 2 adults now, and then also at the same time leaving South Africa at some point to live in my literal fatherland in Malawi. That's where I really felt human for the first time, in the way in which I was received. And then I came back 7 years later, and in my pathway as a seeker, I discovered the Enneagram, spiral dynamics, the integral framework, family and organizational constellations. And I think today I'm here to learn as I am here to share how really being othered feels like, makes you think, and actually sort of influences from within and from out there how we engage. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Good news. So I usually start these sessions by just talking a little bit about the theme, where it was my initiative to have a particular theme. And in this case, I said to Renata, let's have a community of practice on the Enneagram and social justice, or the Enneagram and social transformation, given where the world is at right now. I think that what we're witnessing is a real slide to fascism, particularly in the US, the UK, India, parts of Europe. The right wing is really growing, and those authoritarian forces are really repressive. And it's a question, it poses a question to me as an Enneagram person, is if we're doing leadership development and we committed to creating a better world, which I know all of us are, that we really care. We're in this work because we care. We do it with heart, we do it with love, and we want to be a force for good in the world. What does it mean to do that in a time like this? What is our role? How do we orient ourselves? Are we just gonna kind of bury our head in the sand and work one-on-one with leaders? What is the space for us at a time like this? And I don't have any answers. I try and find my little tiny space to do something, but I think we're probably all doing that in one way or another, or just trying to survive the insanity, because there's so much of it. So I thought, let's have a session about this topic. Good News is a friend of mine, and we've been in teaching and learning spaces together. And I know some of his activist background from our friendship. So I wanted to invite Good News to come and talk to us about his thoughts about this topic, and being an expert, having thought very deeply about all of these issues. Thank you for agreeing, Good News. I really, really appreciate you coming to our space to do this.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ingrid. And welcome to everybody here. And I believe that as we navigate the next hour and a bit, is to actually declare my invitation to all of you to ask even the most unthinkable questions, because you're getting an opportunity to connect with somebody who knows that our states of consciousness are not the same. Our developmental pathways have not touched all the points that others have. So in that spirit, you're getting a unique flame, so to speak. I'd like to refer to it as a flame that continuously burns. And I like the term about being a seeker, because as a 469 tri-type, the nickname behind it is called the seeker. And it sort of, in retrospect, explains to me my search for knowledge, my search for experiences, and my search for different ways of engagement, of which towards the end, or rather at the end of this interaction, I would like to maybe even during the interaction to say, what is it that we could do differently as practitioners to ensure that we're not just in it for the individual interactions with the one-on-one leaders? Because what happens as we grow as practitioners and coaches, we tend to receive the cream of the crop or the apex of leadership of the various spaces that we find ourselves in. And the apex, by its nature, has got fewer people at the top. So it means our impact to reach large numbers of people is limited. And so my dream, again, I'm just accelerating to the end, is to one day have a session at the FNB Stadium, the home of Kaizer Chiefs, and have 100,000 people talking about the things that we share in the community of practice. And I don't think it's an unrealizable dream. It can happen. And I think the father of psychoanalysis at some point was thinking about therapy being given to people via some modality such that all the citizens of the country would receive that kind of support. And I don't think that is a realizable dream, but this one of actually impacting society through our practice in larger numbers is possible because they would want to, not because we want them to. Yeah. So as we were preparing and discussing this, I got to see Ingrid's 2 slides. Maybe we should move to that slide after the preparation from me to we. Yes. So when I was looking at this, there was this kind of a light bulb moment for me as I looked across in terms of the causes of the underlying motivations and also the development of the Enneagram type adaptation and false self. I thought about a thing that is more around saying, how do we expand and include our experiences such that if I am a Westerner or I'm a white person, how do I ensure that when I look at the self, I look at the self within the context of a wider community rather than only the people that look like me? So that my own developmental context is wider than just the people that are like me, and also to really look at the way in which I interact with the world when I see those people. So in the end, if then as I develop from the egoistic state of consciousness all the way, I don't think any of us can claim that they would reach the unitive or the sacred state of consciousness, because research tells us that only 1 to 2% of the people of the world ever reach that. But the integral state of consciousness has got about 28% people of the world in it. And that number shrinks if you look at what you introduced, Ingrid, in the beginning. When fascism rises, the number of integral people and the people that are at that state of consciousness becomes lower. The egoistic and the sort of socialized state of consciousness harbors about 70% of the people of the world. And again, that number rises to above 80% in those societies that are leaning more away from democracy towards fascism than democratic states. But again, in a democratic form of governance, if there is a homogeneous population, it's highly unlikely that in enneagrammatic kind of language, when we look at the healthy self, that self would not be healthy to the extent of including others that don't look like us. Even our instincts, the heart wound, all the way to developing the type and the subtype would be limited insofar as consciousness is concerned. I may not be able to feel the pain and have compassion and empathy for someone that doesn't look like me if I have not walked that path. And I have seen situations whereby through dehumanization, a person that gets hurt and even sometimes dies most of the times, the people who don't look like that person from a point of privilege find it very difficult to empathize with that person.
Yeah.
Because they do not, it's more like if you were to go into the military space and you look at the radar systems that protect countries, if there were to be a unidentified flying object that does not fit the shape and the technical aspects of an aircraft or a missile, those systems would not be able to pick up those things. So similarly, I think as human beings, we are least able to pick up the challenges that are faced by those who do not look like us from a place of privilege. And furthermore, if you go to the next slide, you will see there the whole journey that actually begins with some of the examples of caregivers' trauma. So when I look at our parents and I look at myself as a parent, I find myself affected by war, affected by social breakdown, and also the whole damaging effects of not being able to enjoy life to the fullest from the time I was born. But also, on the other hand, when I look at my friends and my colleagues who have grown in privilege, generally that is white people in South Africa and the world over, they find it very difficult to empathize and to be compassionate with the challenges somebody like me faces. So in the end, it means full engagement to create a South Africa that we would have wanted to live in is not going to be realized until us as the practitioners in this group actually start dreaming about that, start visualizing it and feel it at the level of the bone how it feels like to live in a South Africa where all human beings are viewed as human beings, irrespective of race, gender, uh, culture, or creed. And only then will the founding principles of our Constitution come alive. It's difficult now. It's just like a myth that we have such a wonderful Constitution, but it doesn't come to life because we didn't change the head, the heart, and the body through the gut to actually start realizing at a psychological and mental level what it really means to give human rights to everybody, including those who were excluded. Yeah.
Mm.
Maybe I should stop there for a while so that we can sort of engage on this.
Mm. So Goodnews, I'm wondering if you could go back to the previous slide.
Yes.
When I made that slide, I was looking at the developmental impacts on the left-hand side that lead to our need for an adaptation to our context. You know, as I teach the Enneagram, it's we need a reality strategy. And the more traumatized we are, the more rigid our reality strategy tends to be, more formulaic. So if you look at the things there on the left, self-affirmation, instinctual needs, like a baby crying to get fed, these are healthy needs. The baby uses the language it has to get its needs fulfilled. And then you have the wounding of the instincts in the second column there, which is the deficits in terms of meeting those needs, which leads to a preoccupation. You have the individual heart wounds and the lost childhood message, where the child feels like I'm not really loved, my needs aren't really taken care of. And all of us have those deficits to a greater or lesser degree. So every single human being has an Enneagram type. But what the nature of the deficits can be so vastly different. And when I create this slide, I think about it in terms of a little nuclear family where maybe the chronic trauma is that the child gets told every time they get a test, oh, what happened to the 3%? Why didn't you get an A? Or there's neglect in terms of the mother being busy on her cell phone. So the picture in my mind, creating a slide like this, is kind of white middle class household with micro traumas. And yeah, obviously there's a wide range of trauma in white middle class households. You also get domestic violence, addiction, alcoholism, all kinds. You get the full range. But generally, I think in Enneagram communities, we're talking in terms of the household. And for me, what you're saying is the unit of analysis can't be the household when you're living in a society that's got collective and intergenerational trauma. So maybe you can, with your eyes, when you look at this slide, what do you see in these boxes on the left?
I see a multi-layered experience that is not just what you see in a white middle-class family. And I see my family having been limited to such an extent that that journey from birth through wounding and the wounding of the heart and the development of the type and the subtype is actually layered by many things to such an extent that even though I may be or I am a social 6, but I am a different social 6 to my friend who is Johan, who lived a different life from mine in the same towns and cities that I've lived in. So Johan's experience and the way he shows up because usually I say there's 4 questions to answer from a me perspective. Who am I? Why am I like this? And how do I show up? And what's my core belief? So when I answer those questions, the core belief that comes out is sort of largely affected by societal layers that delivered me to the world the way I am, and delivered Johan to be a different man to who I am, whilst at the same time, at a human level, because we are both social six, we are the same, but different at the same time. So it's that whole thing of being the same and being different that I believe there's probably a multi-layered approach as we go from the left to the right here that requires us as practitioners to recognize that and recognize the social ills that would have delivered me to be the man that I am. But also on the other hand, there is a gift in the suffering that comes with the societal situation in South Africa, in Africa, and in the world. Because the gift that I believe I have received from the trauma is that I am more able to sense and make sense of the environment. And because I wouldn't like to be the same as those who afflicted me with the traumas that I received, I always pray, hope, wish, and practice my life such that I do not become a perpetrator of those traumas on other people. And the downside of it may be, I may be a Mr. Nice Guy and a people pleaser that does not actually look after the needs of the self. Yes, yeah.
So when you say multi-layered, I'm imagining that the heart wound and the lost childhood message there have a social dimension, ethnicity or race dimension, a class dimension.
Yes.
For more privileged people, the heart wound is, I spent quite a lot of time alone playing at the swimming pool with mud. It's a very different heart wound to, I guess, you tell us, like encountering racism for the very first time.
Yeah, very different because, first of all, the kind of a house we grew up in was like a 2-room house, not a 2-bedroom house, just 2 rooms to house and raise 5 children in. It was only at the age of 14 or 15 that we moved into a much bigger house. And even then, it was just a 1 additional bedroom. Untarred roads, muddy roads when it's raining, no amenities like parks and stuff like that. And then still using a communal tap in our first home. So we had to go and draw water about 150 meters away from our house. And at the time, I actually didn't register that in my school, we were on a feeding scheme because our parents couldn't afford to give us the nutrition that we needed to be able to function in our development from an education point of view. So we were given, there's a company called Piots that used to deliver the biscuits, ginger biscuits, and all sorts of other biscuits. And then large cans of milk. So you had to bring a cup to school so that you can receive the milk and a biscuit to supplement your recommended daily allowance for these things. Yeah. And also a situation whereby at some point, Afrikaans became a medium of instruction. That's how then Afrikaans became or acquired the status of being the language of the oppressor.
Yeah.
So you can imagine now when you join a public sector organization as a practitioner and a leader who's right up there at the level of a director, and then in the meeting, somebody comes in and they insist on speaking Afrikaans. The kind of conflict and the turmoil that generates within you as a leader of these people, and at the same time, wanting to create a harmonious working environment at the same time. Yes, yeah.
And for those from the US who don't know South African history, when Afrikaans was made the medium of instruction in South Africa, which is a tiny minority language relative to our indigenous languages, there was a big uprising in Soweto outside Johannesburg, and a lot of children were shot. I don't know, you can maybe provide a little bit more context for the Soweto uprising.
Yes, so the Soweto uprising was actually the epicenter of a national uprising. So it started in June 16 in 1976. Tsietsi, I forget his surname now, was the leader of the student movement. And there was a picture that went viral, even though there was no social media, but it went viral across various newsrooms across the world, where a child was shot, the first person to, if not the second, who died during that uprising. And during that time, I remember there was a funeral or two every Saturday and Sunday, burying the children who were killed during the protests against Afrikaans being a medium of instruction. In excess of 600 children were killed during that time. Can't remember the exact number, but I know it was more than 600.
I can share that picture if you give me sharing rights. I'd love people to see it, especially people who don't know about South Africa. It's a very iconic picture here.
Yes.
And we celebrate June the 16th every year. And this is the picture. This is the famous picture that went viral when the police fired on children and killed very many of them. Yeah, and there were funerals. Yeah, I remember there were funerals every week.
Yes.
So what does that remind me of? You know, there's a genocide going on in Gaza, and children are the main victims.
Yes.
This kind of logic prevails. And so here we sit as Enneagram practitioners. How do we handle this? So good news. What do we do if we care?
I think what we need to do is to raise the awareness in one of the four pillars of society first, as a priority. There is a contrarian I know who is in the area of leadership, Henry Mintzberg. Henry Mintzberg.
Yeah.
He wrote the book Managers, Not MBAs. But his seminal piece that he wrote was, and it's available online, it's the title of the article is Managing Government and Governing Management. And in that piece, he talks about how the four pillars of society are the indicator, a collective indicator of the level of development of all societies in the world. The first pillar of society he speaks about is the one that I'm going to start with. It's the private sector. So he says, if the private sector gets to open up and be more conscious in our language, things do change for the better. We have access to corporate leaders, those leaders who lead organizations that are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and also in banking terms, these leaders, they are clients of banks in the sector of corporate and investment banking, and also in business banking. They actually make the economy go round. And if we could target these leaders from a consciousness point of view to understand three things: history, the philosophy of leadership, and also the whole thing around consciousness and values, so that they become intentionally the leader they want to be, and not just be cruising along without an end game. These are the leaders who earn probably close to 60 to 80% of the earnings of anybody that works in South Africa. And the second pillar of society that I think we should target as practitioners is the public sector. The public sector is very relevant because the largest numbers of leaders live in the public sector. By shifting the public sector, it means we shift society big time. We have got inquiries and commissions of inquiry going on now. We've got 2 or 3 inquiries going on. And none of this is mentioned in the context of what we know as Enneagram practitioners. In fact, psychology and human behavior is not represented in government. There is no minister of human behavior.
Yeah, minister of the virtues.
Exactly. So in the end, we have something that comes close to that is social development. And if we understand the history of the last 33 years or so in South Africa, that is now the post-apartheid South Africa, that is the most junior ministry in the cabinet. So all the ministers that they don't like, they usually appoint there. The least competent minister will be the social development minister. But social development is supposed to be right up there as the most senior minister in cabinet to actually make sure. So we can actually influence that. One of the things that people don't understand is that psychologists are the ones who cooked up global racism. It didn't just come out of the blue. And it was sustained over a period of time through support from practicing psychologists. And I believe that we can reverse that as practitioners by becoming the beacon of hope and also an instigator of what are the things that we can move around in society to actually have the biggest shift in human behavior, so that we don't continue the way we have.
So I want to just ask, when you switch to speaking about psychologists, is that the third pillar, like healing, helping educators as a pillar, or are you talking about the institute?
I'm still in that public sector pillar.
Okay.
To say we can influence the composition of the cabinet and government and actually make sure that psychology as a human construct is represented in cabinet.
Okay. All right, thanks. And then what I would ask is, traditional Western psychology is very pathologizing. And when I did community psychology back in the day, they used to talk about, like, if a Sangoma comes in, they're having twasa, within a Western framework, they'll be diagnosed with schizophrenia, whereas in
Yes,
indigenous cosmology, they're sent to go through an initiation and become a herbalist and a diviner. So
yes.
what type of psychology? Because there's psychology and there's psychology.
Aha, that's very true. So when people ask me, what role do I play in society? I say I'm a Pan-African coach. And I use Pan-Africanism, I believe, I think, maybe wrong. I am probably the first coach to say he or she is a Pan-African coach. So why did I then pick that Pan-Africanism and attach to coaching? The reason is because I have seen that practitioners across the world, professionals of different persuasions, you will have Pan-American professionals. You've got the APA in America. It's exactly it stands for what you have sort of described insofar as psychology as a profession is concerned. You've got pan-European professionals. You've got all of these professionals who love the continents in which they operate in, warts and all, with all of the blind spots that they carry. So if we had a Pan-African psychology society, we wouldn't have that because it would be inclusive, it would be holistic, and Ugutwasa would be part of it, probably would have the same stature as Chinese traditional medicine in China.
Mm-hmm.
So the academic environment in China recognizes Chinese medicine alongside Western practice of medicine in China.
Mm.
They don't just ascribe to Western medicine constructs and whatever they call those things. They use both. So you would have in South Africa, in that ministry, a minister who has got a wider view of the world. And you would have psychology departments in the various universities, especially the Ivy League universities within South Africa, that are also inclusive. And only then you'll be able to have a symposia, you'll be able to have research that pushes for integration and harmonization of the world of human behavior as a science. That's what would happen, yes.
That's interesting. So then you'd have the advantage of, you could go to a traditional healer and claim from medical aid for psychological support. It could be a psychotherapist, same recognition.
Yes, exactly. And you would have research funding allocated in an equitable way in order to make sure that you have got PhDs in African traditional medicine to the same extent that you have PhDs in Chinese traditional medicine.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there's like post-colonial psychology. I think of Bayo Akomolafi. I don't know how much you know him. I love listening to him.
From a distance, yes.
He speaks about how he calls himself a recovering psychologist, and he says that Western psychology constructs the subject that they then aim to fix. And I'm wondering if we do that with the Enneagram. We say, okay, now you're a type 1. I know how to fix your oneness. How can we bring a Pan-African consciousness to what we're doing with the system that we got from, well, it's from Egypt, as a Sufism, Christianity, whatever, but it's still very much within a Western thinking tradition. If we just be aware that actually a lot of Egyptian stuff in it, which is African, how do you see that question? Let me just summarize my question. We're walking around with a Western tool. We're walking around with Western designed questionnaires, and we're applying them all over the place. What are the blind spots of doing that?
we think that knowledge is finite. That's the first challenge that we have. In as much as there is an infinitesimal knowledge about knowledge, that it is not finite. We also, at the same time, even oppose that as knowledge designers. Should we present even science as something that is finite? And I'm not sure why then we continue to research if that is the case. So in the end, we would have to reconstruct and ask different questions. One of the questions that one of my colleagues has developed. So my slides, I think I'm going to add 2 more slides before we distribute them. So there's a slide around knowledge design and the lower or the deeper levels of questions sound like this. What is it in the way in which we talk about this that makes it very difficult for us to know more? So it's a development of meta language that doesn't exist today that will allow us to transcend the blind spots that we have about knowledge so that we can include those that we have added into the new body of knowledge. So you will see that if we may just jump 2 slides from the pyramid slide, we will be able to see something there. Let's just go there, Renate.
That question is so brilliant. Hey?
Yes, yes.
It's like, how are ways of thinking stopping us from knowing more? How are our questions holding us back? We aren't asking.
Exactly. Yes. So what you see now as a slide was actually attempting to answer this question, to say from a self perspective, the question I ask is, who am I beyond those that look like me? So just saying who am I is not enough. But how am I seen by the people who don't look like me? Why am I? Meaning that, why am I not seeing others? And why am I othering them? When I ask that question, it will open my eyes. The third question is, how do I show up then? When we were discussing this during the week, Ingrid, I talked about code switching and how my son would speak to his mother in isiXhosa and then speak in English to me because, I created that problem by speaking to him in English. And I think many Westerners do the same. They are a certain who when they are amongst themselves. But the moment a non-Westerner walks into the room, they become a different person. And in as much as we say our practice should include reflection, and I don't think in our reflective questions, the Westerner asks, how did I treat good news today? As opposed to how I treated Johan. So once you start asking those questions, it becomes difficult. It was different. So in the cognitive practice, we should be asking questions like, do we embrace the other people? Which is the question you asked earlier on. How do we make sure that the diversity of the community of practice is widened? How are we organized? Do we have a mini practice in each and every one of the former Bush universities, as we refer to them? Or in the communities, like in Soweto, do we have a community of practice there of Enneagram practitioners who get together to the same extent that we do, so that when we have what I would call a biannual, is that biannual if we do it every 2 years?
It sometimes means twice a year. It sometimes means every 2 years.
Okay, but we will need to have something that a gathering in South Africa every 2 years of as diverse as possible practitioners who then contribute to the body of knowledge. That's the question then I ask under the body of knowledge. Do we have aspirations of how the body of knowledge will be enriched such that it is inclusive? I don't think we have those aspirations in large numbers, both globally and locally.
Yeah. No, I mean, my little white head didn't occur to me. And it sounds like a great idea.
Yes. So that's how I would actually suggest that as practitioners we do that. So the third and the fourth pillar, going back now to Minsberg's model, is the non-profit pillar. The non-profit pillar is essential because if you look at organizations like, for example, Section 27, who have really influenced the way the education sector improves, and then there are a few others who have also influenced. In fact, the Thabo Bester case was actually cracked by a non-profit organization, not by mainstream media. So Thabo Bester is a person who was incarcerated and sentenced to life imprisonment because of the way he was behaving. He killed somebody, and he also raped a couple of women and was sentenced to life. And then the way he escaped from jail was that they took a dead body and they burnt it and they presented it as if he's the one who died there. And then he continued to live his life outside prison and was arrested more than 2 years or so after he had escaped. That case, if there were no NGOs in South Africa, would never have been cracked. So the number of NGOs that sit in the psychology space, I forget the professor who's based in Durban, is a psychologist, Indian South African, who's done a lot of work in this area. I will Google him when I get a chance to, not to be speaking, but listening, and then I'll present the name. So he's one of the people that belongs to some kind of a Pan-African psychology outfit. So I think about those outfits. If we were to have a coalition of human behavior, non-profit organizations coming together, and we invite them into those once every 2 years kind of symposia, so that in the end, we may influence research, we may influence practice, and we may also influence policy, public policy, that gets developed over the next 10 years. So that in the end, apartheid as a mindset, misogyny as a mindset, patriarchy as a mindset, all sorts of these isms may be diminished over the next decade. That's how I think about it. And then the last pillar is the cooperative sector, where entities get set up, owned by communities. The cooperative sector, even if you narrow it down to ownership of financial institutions like banks, community banks, it's least used in South Africa. But if you go to countries like Kenya, East Africa, you'll find that there are many banks that are owned by communities there that are an alternative to the mainstream universal banks that we have in South Africa. So by then inviting the cooperative sector, we can influence and change the way citizens in South Africa behave, insofar as othering and all of these other things that are making our work as Enneagram practitioners to be difficult.
So I don't want to be the only one hogging the questions, but what comes to me there is, so there are institutional things that we can do. We can be in different institutions, But what are we actually doing there? Are we getting people to see through difference? Are we getting them to collaborate? Are we getting them to be more ethically conscious? Because the Enneagram is an ethical system, that we stop being selfish and triggered into our ego, and we think further ahead in terms of compassion and that kind of thing. Or are we helping organize? Like, I was invited to do some stuff for different organizations, nonprofits, like Earth Life Africa. They wanted to be more organized, and then a group of Jewish anti-Zionists who needed some psychological support to do their work. But what work, doing what with these different people?
All right. I believe that there's probably 4 things that we do, not to the same extent across the 4 things I'm going to mention. The first thing that we do as Enneagram practitioners, we help people at the level of the self, the me part. So whenever we go to organizations, we help people to be more of who they are. They ask those me questions and they get to know their type and. The second thing that we do, we help people to move from me to we, meaning that they start now relating better with each other and how they see other people. The third thing we do as practitioners, we help people to do their work differently. And I have got different models that support the different parts that I'm mentioning now. Like, for example, when it comes to the me part, I don't just use one construct. I'll use the Enneagram, I'll use spiral dynamics, I will use the integral framework, I will use all sorts of things, including helping people to understand the constellation. So I'm a constellation practitioner. I help families and organizations to use the constellations framework to effect change. So in the end, when it comes to the context, meaning the work now, whether it's the Jewish board of directors or this, that, or the other, they have got work that they do. So I use the leadership pipeline there as a construct to say, at the lower level, this is what you're concerned with. At a higher level, you're concerned with the next 50 years if you're a huge organization. Therefore, as a leader, if you're just looking, navel-gazing, you are not doing the work of a leader. You're doing the work of the lower level person who's an individual contributor. And then the fourth thing that we do as practitioners is to influence, and we do it less, this one, is to influence the values of the people that we work with. I call that the worldview part. So it's the me, the we, the work, and the worldview. And you'll find that in all of these 4 pillars of the things that we do not challenge deeply held beliefs and the body of knowledge that sits in these 4 pillars. So that's why then at a country level, we should be seeking to influence public policy. That's the first thing that we need to actually want to influence. And we can't do this if there is no minister of human behavior. If political parties, when they want us to vote for them, they don't tell us how they're going to change and shift the way we see each other through the current filters that we use. So you've got a party like, for example, the Democratic Alliance, but they are not the only ones. So they mustn't worry that I've just mentioned them. You've got parties that, like the Democratic Alliance, that actually want to retain apartheid, meaning that they have not moved on in the global racism agenda that is in place.
Yep.
And they want then everybody to just, simply because you're free, you must just do your thing, you know? Yeah. So in the end, if we can't influence policy, we can't then say we are worthy of the badge that we wear as Enneagram practitioners. We need to influence industry bodies, how they do business, which is why I mentioned the 4 pillars. We need to influence the education institutions such that there is a faculty in each university that seeks to shift archaic belief systems, so
Yes.
that in the end, what the National Party used to do with education is what we as the practitioners need to do with education to sensitize people, to get people to start being more aware. In fact, there should be no one who goes through university without studying the new body of knowledge insofar as human behavior is concerned. If a child goes all the way to matric and they don't get taught that John and Zodwa, they are the same. They are both human beings and they both need to be treated accordingly. And the books also do not show race in the way in which we do life orientation. Then there's a problem in this country insofar as education is concerned. So that's how deeply I have thought about all of these things insofar as what do we do? We have to be like an amoeba or an octopus that reaches out to all parts of society and influence such that 20 years from now, this country and this continent is never going to be the same again.
Mm.
Mm.
And you, the question in the chat there from Nola, please repeat. There's the me, then there's the me to we. Then you spoke about influence. What are those three things? Are there 3 or 4 in that category? The 3 things we need to do.
So if you move from me to we, then it's the work or the context of what we're doing. So that's the third thing.
Okay. So within each of these 4 pillars, within the private sector, we go from me to we, and then the context. In the public sector, the same 3 in these different environments.
Yeah, we go through the 4, the me, the we, the work that we do, and the worldview, which is the values that govern the way we do things. So those are the 4 things that we need to focus on as practitioners. We influence the individual, we influence the collective, we influence how they do their work, and we also influence their belief system. So those are the 4 things. Yeah. Me, we, work, world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see who else would like to ask a question about this. Who'd like to come in and ask some questions? How does this thinking affect your way of thinking about your work and what you might do differently? Who would like to say anything or ask? Raymond, you said that it's a very relevant conversation. Maybe you can kick us off there. Your considerations about the relevance and the context.
So kind of I do appreciate the kind of understanding. Often like when we work with Enneagram, we work with personality types. It's very rooted in myself as a system and trying to understand myself as a system. And often with that Western medical model, almost like an understanding of it like outside, the impact of what actually forms us. And I think over the years, the Enneagram has like evolved at least to kind of understanding that relational quality of the Enneagram is actually really where the juice is. And I think that's where we kind of find ourselves working with corporates, team development, how to be more effective in communicating with each other, managing each other's, being able to be more effective listening. And this level is like kind of engaging with broader context and using those skills of deep listening and deep connection, not only at a team and an interpersonal level, but almost ourselves within that greater context. And really appreciating how diverse those contexts are and the impact of those contexts on how we communicate with each other and on how we experience ourselves as individuals. And I think the Enneagram is starting to grapple, as well as in psychology, like trying to find a place for psychology in South African context, and I think even in the world context, like to make it more relevant. So I think it's amazing work, and I think it's really, and it mirrors that, like me, myself, and then examining those world, our schemas and our perspectives of what we take for granted to be true, and really allow ourselves to kind of understand that even that is like kind of wired into our understanding of our relationships and wired into our own nervous systems as individuals. So it's really deep transformational work.
Certainly, certainly. And I applaud you for this because it's that gap between the me and the we. I'm not sure whether you saw the movie Avatar.
Yes, the first one.
Yes. So in Avatar, they took the isiZulu greeting that says, Sawubona, I see you. So seeing another at a deep level is the essence of what you've just said. Because if I don't see you, how could I possibly be empathetic and compassionate with you? How could I be able to serve you as my colleague in ways that are uplifting so that you feel seen, heard, and also valued? So I see you beyond the type. I see you beyond the instinct that drives you. And I see the values that you hold dear, so that when I'm preparing to meet with you, I then take all of this into account so that our meeting becomes as harmonious as we can towards the problem that we are trying to solve in the context of the day or the hour.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
It's almost that level of I see you actually beyond the time.
Yes, yes.
And even almost beyond your current context, even seeing you within context, but then really being able to transcend even that.
Exactly.
I think it taps into that kind of line
Beautiful.
interconnectedness.
Yes,
So
yes.
it speaks to me in that level, I think.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Good news, you say, help people at the level of self, help people move from me to we, and then help people do their work differently. What do you mean by do work differently?
Usually, if you walk across the 4 pillars, the private sector has got a very cold profit motive. And some people are still stuck there. I'm just generalizing. And then the second pillar of the nonprofit, sometimes it lacks economic considerations. And then the public sector, usually it lacks the long view because they work with 5-year voting terms. I have noticed, probably just right across the different pillars, that many of the leaders and practitioners that I've met over the last maybe 15 years or so, they don't even know that there's a thing called Agenda 2063, which is the driving force behind development on the continent from Cape to Cairo. But at the level at which our clients are operating, they are supposed to have the long view, irrespective of which pillar they're operating from.
Right.
So having the long view allows for harmony between the profit motive, development motive, and also the societal motive that you find from the NGOs. And then also within the cooperative sector, to actually develop communities such that they have got a way of really liberating themselves and not depending on either the private sector or the public sector or government for them to have a better life. So once you help the leaders to see these things for themselves and awaken to this, then they become better leaders and become better practitioners.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's how then you can sort of create a magnet for exponential growth in terms of awareness at an individual level, beyond my society or my community or the people that look like me, and also transcend even the pillars. Because you do have situations where a nonprofit has sort of become the biggest contributor to economic growth. And it's because the leaders there have managed to see beyond the sector that they belong to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
So that's how I see it.
Thank you. Bridget has her hand up. Go ahead, Bridget.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good news. I have so many thoughts and questions for you, but let me say this. I have spent 25 years or more working at the nonprofit and the community levels of what you're speaking about.
Okay.
I work in the US context, right?
Yes.
And in this moment, I am working with organizations, leaders, and communities that have suffered such substantial losses in terms of 25, 30, 40, and in the case of a lot of systemic racism, like hundreds of years of work. And my hypothesis that I'm working with is that these communities, there's a lot of we or a lot of I that needs to be healed in order to move forward in a collective and collective societal change. And my hypothesis is the Enneagram can really help us do that, to see ourselves and hear ourselves, and then to be able to see others and understand their, in Ingrid's words, their reality, their map of reality is very different from mine.
Yes.
And I just wonder what advice you might have for folks like us, because Renata was my first teacher here, and I started this question of what can we learn from South Africa as we try to continue social change here in America, and in like one of the most desperate times perhaps in our country's history. So I'm just curious how you might answer that question, and then what messages of hope or healing might you share with us when there's so many people in this moment really, really, really suffering.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridget. Very profound questions. The way in which we can probably help the situation is to push for exponential growth and exponential awareness. So we need to accept that the body of knowledge as it stands is limited. And it has been developed in a pond that is too small in order for it to take all the moving parts into account. So by adding more moving parts, which will then add to the variables that one is working with at those different levels of modality, whether it's the me, the we, or the work, we then gonna create a challenge for the teams and individuals that we work with so that they may be able to process at higher levels of complexity. And that complexity also increases the time through which we have to see. So if we look through the 5, 6, and 7 head types, they are the ones who are sort of endowed with the natural ability to deal with foresight thinking. But if they are built in a laboratory that only takes care of their own, they also are limited. If you look at the heart people, they are most likely to have a natural propensity to reflect and look at history in ways that are profound, which then helps societies and communities and entities to be more adept at understanding where they come from. And if the intention is to ensure that we don't repeat the ills of the past, we will shine the light on the history. But innovation will be driven by the foresight and also the need to sort of create creative spaces that will give that exponential growth, whatever that growth means. Doesn't mean just economic, but awareness itself needs to be increased exponentially for us to be able to do the things we need to do. And then the body people are the ones who put their body behind what they believe in. And I think there is a need to fall in love with vulnerability. Because if we're not prepared to be vulnerable, we will not take the risks that we are supposed to take in order to liberate the me and the we and the work that we do to the extent that we should. So by knowing how all of these things interlink and how they must be exponentially grown in order to have the desired impact, we need to know them at a technical level, but because we have a worldview that says what we have is not enough, we need to do more at these different levels, we'll then be able to actually do what we need to do by helping the leaders and other practitioners that actually do that. So, messages of hope. I think one of the units I didn't talk about is the family unit. I briefly talked about family constellations and how families can be influenced to actually do the things that we talk about at a work and corporate level and enterprise level. My daughter's 25. One of the things that I have done differently in my relationship with her is to encourage her to challenge me. That's the one thing. Secondly, is to encourage her to not shrink, whilst at the same time being respectful, but not shrink. Thirdly, to believe wholeheartedly that she is entitled, big words, to love and belonging. She should never question whether I love her or whether she belongs to the family. By doing that, I believe I have liberated her to be the woman she needs to be with the challenges that we are facing today. And if each and every parent could say that about their child and accept them when they pursue a career that is not a head career if they are a head parent, that is not a heart career if they're a heart parent, and that is not a body career if they're a body parent. Because one of the things that I believe is the biggest influencer in how we become as adults is the parents that we have. So as parents, we need to know that point at which we need to be the cheerleaders and sit in the audience and not be the directors of our children's lives when they become adults. So there for me is both a stretch and also saying some parents today have started to do that. They don't dictate to their children what they should do or pursue. And as a result, if we can have more people doing that, we'll have more liberated and more adults with the affinity to do more, to think more, to feel more, and to do more, because that's what they do. So there is also a sprouting of holistic health centers in South Africa, not to the same extent that we should. And as a result of that, the recognition of healing beyond Western medicine is starting to grow. And that is another contributor to actually seeing those that are not seen. You also have got, because of the unemployment situation in South Africa, you have got more young people than in my day, when I was young, who start their own businesses today as a result of the liberation that they have that says government is not going to provide, corporates are not going to provide. Therefore, let me start something, whether it's jewelry making, it's diamond polishing, or whatever. Even just fixing cars or doing plumbing and all sorts of other things, I will do that so that I can be able to put food on the table and educate my children. So yeah, those are some of the hopeful things that are happening in South Africa and in the continent in general.
So would you see us there, Good News, doing what we can to support entrepreneurship using the Enneagram? I've recently been invited to do something like that. So things like self-efficacy, for example, different Enneagram types, each have different self-efficacy challenges. We don't generally think of 8s and 3s having a self-efficacy challenge, but they actually do, because they, you know, all our types get in the way of us setting up a successful business, good stakeholder relationships, thinking in terms of a value proposition that actually is what people want. So do you see the Enneagram helping people with that?
Yes. Self-awareness as freedom is a thing that has sort of developed in my mind as a slogan, so to speak. Because if I am self-aware, I am most likely to be free, and freedom beyond those that look like me. So not in the Western narrow essence of self-awareness. Self-awareness that transcends human political identity limitations. So the fact that I'm Black, and the fact that I am a woman, the fact that I am young, all of those things, if I'm not liberated from those societal manufactured problems, I am not going to be able to be successful. There's a book around manufactured consent, which talks about how dominant narratives actually influence how we see the world. So if we can just go beyond that, what the mainstream media is saying about me from a political identity point of view, if I'm not free from that, I am least likely to be free. And we can use the Enneagram as a leveler. It creates a common language. It creates, in its developed sense now, will create a common language that transcends race, gender, and all of these other limitations.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I bumped into a young woman, very young, and she was sitting with her friend and they were having a drink. This was at the coffee shop where we were the previous time. And she was wearing her academic gown. And so I started chatting to them, and she said, no, she's just graduated, but she's so worried about getting a job, and she's so anxious. So I said to her, okay, well, just enjoy today. But she was saying, what can I do? What can I do? So I said, send me your CV, and also get on LinkedIn and find people whose job you want to do. Say in 5 years' time, whose job would you want? And so she did. And I said to her, just reach out to them and tell them the exact truth. I've just graduated. This is what I love. I'm so excited about this, but I don't know what to do. Is it possible to get an hour of your time? Because I think you're amazing and I want to be you. And she said, no, they never will. I said, if they've got Enneagram 3 in them, they're going to be flattered. If they're 2, I went around the Enneagram and said how each person would love to feel, to be chosen
Yes,
and told, I want to be you. So to humanize everybody, you know. And I said
yes,
to her, what's the worst thing that can happen? They ignore you. That's literally the
exactly.
worst thing that can happen. So then she set up coffee with this hot shot in the industry she wants to be in. And she'll so, I think she's a six. She's saying, what time should I suggest? What should I wear? Should I? And then, but it was the Enneagram part of it was for me saying to her, listen, that person is human and these are their insecurities.
Yeah,
And this
yeah,
is why they're going to love it. And kind of being able to just give her that little reframe
yes, yes.
really helped her. For me, it was the
So
most.
you shattered the elitist filter, you shattered the class or classicist filter, and you also shattered the deeply held beliefs in general about people, and then grouping them and seeing them as doing this or doing that when we ask of them to help us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of takes me to the initial quote of Naranja, which I sort of looked at when we were starting to say, when he says, this is an inseparable facet of civilization. When we say that we are civilized people, we mean that we are people of certain dignity, a certain cultural refinement, a certain psychological or spiritual evolution, and also a certain quality. We think that we are civilized, he says, not barbarian, not primitive. But is that so when we look at what is happening in the world today? Because up until now, civilized man has shown himself to be the most destructive of animals. And if we do not realize this, it is because we idealize ourselves and reinterpret our will for power as meritorious privilege, as in the case of the oligarchic and aristocratic character. So certain people are supposed to have power because they are ordained so by society. So just right there, in a few minutes, you liberated that young graduate to actually see themselves as being worthy of being listened to. Yeah. Thank you.
I think there it's like I see it as we've got hermeneutical resources that people don't have. Like we've got through our privileged, we have the resource of psychology, we have a resource of spiral dynamics, the Enneagram, we've got the
Yes.
terminology of self-efficacy, that we are able to see how that person has internalized restrictions. And
Yes.
just say, no, they're irrelevant. And also knowing what it's like to be on the other side in a corporate with a big
Yes.
job. If some graduate contacts you and said, I found you on LinkedIn, please can I sit with you for an hour? I want to be you, I want to do your job. Who can say no to that?
No one. Most people would jump at it. They will make time for that because they are seen to be worthy.
And the person showing initiative, which people love.
Yes, yes. So in the end, when we look at our lives, like I did when I was preparing for this, I was saying, wow, if I can be able to look at the past, the present, and the future, I am most likely, as a human being, to grow. Because if I get stuck in the past, I am least likely to be able to liberate myself. But if I'm not able to reflect on the past and know what it gave me, both as trauma and gift, I may not know who am I, why am I, and how am I. There's nothing that I regret now. I regretted a lot of things before, There's nothing that I regret now in terms of what has happened, because it is both a gift and pain. And I do believe that pain and purpose, they are interlinked.
Yes.
Out of pain, purpose can come.
I'm totally on your page with that.
Yes. Yes.
And then you spoke to me about your son turning 15, and I know that was painful for you because of that was when you were detained. I hope you don't mind me sharing that. But
That's
how
fine.
did you transmute that experience into the gift?
The gift that came out of that trauma, it gave me a fighting spirit. That if I can overcome orchestrated oppression by a system of government at the age of 15, any age thereafter, I'm ready for anything. So the chances of me giving up today on anything are very slim because of that experience.
Mm. Mm.
It has also given me a kind of a gift of not taking things for granted. Because in many conversations with those who have been my captors then, they were also oppressed. They were also forced into a system, and because they didn't have the power to question what they were doing, they succumbed to both peer pressure and government pressure, and they did the things that they would never like to be done to their children. So when a person then does something, the gift that came from there is that, is this person evil? Do they have a horn? Horns and a tail? Is that the only reason that a person would do something bad? And the answer is no. That came from the gift of that trauma. That some people, they do bad things, not because they are bad people, it's the context of their life does not allow them to see outside the evil of what they do. They have sort of normalized. They even justify, they've got reasons that are good for the bad things that they do.
Mm. Mm.
So that gift then allows me to focus on the deed, and not on the person.
So if you were to have the most extreme client who'd been completely brainwashed and was committing atrocities, what would be your first moment of working with that person?
Most of my clients, in fact, all of them, before I take on a client, I look for coachability. So coachability is a very important aspect of the take on for the client. Because if they are not coachable, then I am wasting my time.
Mm.
Once they say they are coachable, they are committing to the journey, I help them to develop the context and the reason why they need a coach. Because it's that big, hairy, audacious purpose that will help both of us to transcend what you have just asked. Because at that point, it's not about what they did in the past. It's about how alive are they today to what they did in the past, and how are they alive today to what they need to do in the future. They may not know what and how, but they will commit to doing something different and I can help them to process what that different thinking would be, what that different feeling would be, what that different doing would be, and what that different overarching value or belief system would be. And then through a lot of tears, sometimes shouting, and all sorts of things happening there, I don't believe in this laboratory thing of coaching. Lots of things happen in coaching, and it's not scripted. As long as you know what the boundaries are, and we can be able to accept what happens there. And as long as there's no abuse by the coach to the client and abuse by the client to the coach, we have to allow everything to happen. And I have walked through hot coals with my clients to get to where they want to be, not where I want them to be, where they want to be.
Yeah. So I'm noticing we've only got a little while left. I'd like to see if anyone's got reflections or other questions for Good News around what we've discussed here today.
My reflection is that as Enneagram practitioners, we have a hope of helping people at the level of self and at the level of each other, certainly, and potentially to do their work slightly differently. I'm not sure how much I can influence worldview and values globally, but certainly within clients and teams, and influencing public policy. I mean, I see my limitations, certainly in terms of that. I'm just, as a last thought, Good News, and I see Debs has a question too. Anything else that we can do as practitioners that will make a difference fundamentally? Because I see the Enneagram so super helpful in people seeing how we are the same.
And I think it's about not using the Enneagram as a blunt instrument or as an instrument for everything, but attach different things to the Enneagram within the context of what is at play at any given time. Because the Enneagram in itself has limitations. And when that context shifts into those specific areas of specialization, it needs to be accompanied by other tools. But also, on the other hand, it's about having a support system like this one that we have in the community of practice. But beyond the community of practice is having intimate beings around ourselves that are practitioners themselves who can help us with our blind spots, and we can help them with their blind spots.
Yeah.
Because when you have this holy grail and Superman or Superwoman approach to being a practitioner, it doesn't help.
Yeah.
Because there is no one that is all-knowing.
Yeah.
So there is a need to have a buddy or a couple of buddies. And I encourage all of my clients early in the beginning of their coaching journey to appoint a personal board. None of my clients do not have a personal board. Personal board helps them to also have a kind of a group of people that are multidisciplinary and multifaceted who help them to deal with their blind spots. And the more diverse that personal board is, the better they become. So if they don't have a black person there, if they're white, then they couldn't possibly be a great leader. And if they don't have a woman there, if they're a man, they are highly unlikely to be a great leader. And if they don't have a young person there, they also, again, won't be able to deal with the younger people in the organization that they are leading. So really, for me, it's not just about the self, it's about the other and the space between me and the other, which is the relational space.
Yeah.
Mastering that relational space is key to the Enneagram. And I think there's a book entitled The Second Mountain. Somebody Brooks wrote that book. I think it's David Brooks. And he talks about character building in the book. And he says, character is not something that I sit in my study and think about it and I come out with a great character. Character building is about agreements, minor agreements in childhood and big agreements in adulthood. And honoring those agreements becomes key in the growth of the leader to the same extent it is to the growth of the practitioner.
Thank you.
Yes.
Deborah, I know you had a question and I know we're at time, but let's...
Okay, I'll just go quickly. Yeah, good news, thank you. You know, when I did my master's in coaching, I worked with spiral dynamics and my model was the integral model. And then I got pulled into the Enneagram work, and I think there's a link with the levels. But what you've reminded me about is the contracting part, and how important the contracting isn't just about the client and their goals, and that is what you work with and their dreams for themselves, but also the level of work that we want to do and the influence and impact we want to have on people. Because otherwise, why am I coaching a very, you know, a person who's on the spiral dynamics is probably at the lowest level and is so shut down that they may well never move beyond that. They may well never grow because their defense mechanism, the ego, is so protective. And so it's making me think a lot about, and I know you mentioned all the different sectors we can work with, but where do we really have impact? And how do we bring the Enneagram to these other tools so that we can really have significant impact? Because sometimes I feel like we're just helping people to navel gaze and only look internally at self. And particularly if the instincts of self-preservation or, you know, certain instincts are really strong, but even social instinct, it's all about image often and not about community and making a difference in the world. So thank you. I'm feeling quite inspired.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your appreciation.
And I don't know if you have time for one more question, Good News, because...
Yes, I do. I do.
This space to be more welcoming and more diverse. And I don't know why it isn't. I went to a Linda Tai program where she's challenging colonial ideas of attachment. And there were about 90 people there, and 90% of them were people of color, indigenous people, children of refugees. And she created a space where that's who showed up, and she created a safe space for that. What do we need to do to have a room where 80% of the people are people of color?
There is, I've forgotten the name of the organization, but when we got free in 1994, they started specializing in recruiting Black people and bringing them back to South Africa. I may find the name of the organization later. But the head of that organization was explaining how they debunk the myth around we can't find Black people in highly sophisticated professions like actuarial science, engineering, chartered accountants, and. And one of the big things that she said was a contributor to their ability to find and attract Black people is that she said, go where they at. Go find them where they at. Tell them why they should come. Make it attractive for them. And you will find them coming in large numbers. So I do have containers of Black people in other institutions. The Association of Black Accountants of Southern Africa is an association of Black accountants. And accountants in South Africa constitute 65% of leaders in the listed companies on the JSE. The Black Management Forum is 100% Black, almost. Black ICT Forum, that's where you'll find these people. So in the end, at first, we're not recruiting Enneagram practitioners, but we are recruiting recipients and users of the Enneagram as a means of improving their lives. So we're going to have to maybe change our target market such that one of the things that I started 10 years ago is the Coaching in Africa Symposium. When I designed it with Mongezi Makalima, I said, what we need to do is to not just invite coaches, invite leaders. So every time we get together, it's a gathering of leaders and coaches. So the community of practice needs to attract leaders in business. So where are they? JSE is the first container for these leaders. They bring them together quarterly. They've got their own breakfasts that we can go there and showcase the beauty of the Enneagram and bring them closer to this. All the chambers, Joburg, I think there's 4 or 5 chambers in Joburg. And then there's another one here in Pretoria, in Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, East London, all cities and towns in South Africa have got chambers. So again, we are now starting to go back to the 4 pillars. The directors general in government, they have got a thing called foresight or something like that. They get together periodically, just as directors generals only, going into their meetings and showcasing the Enneagram, its beauty, and how it can contribute to public service delivery is going to attract them to want to be here. So again, some of the things I said earlier on needs to be brought together and have a recruitment strategy that actually goes and finds the people where they're at. Yeah.
So that's thinking more broadly. I mean, I've always thought of the space as a space of practitioners and coaches who are already kind of serious Enneagram students. But there's no reason why we couldn't have one, like in the first quarter of next year, that's for leaders. And we invite all of our Black coachee leaders.
Yeah. Yes.
And we have a special seminar on something to do with leadership, where it's not just teaching the Enneagram, it's
Yes.
a leadership.
The application thereof. If you come, we'll do a free Enneagram assessment for you, and it's not going to be driven by a bot. We'll interview you and come up with a profile and give you the lots of reports that are generic per type that we can share with the leaders, and then we'll be able to actually bring in these leaders, because they are the ones who are going to say, in my organization, the Enneagram is the preferred modality for understanding human behavior.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe you and Renata can speak about doing a leadership one, like maybe in April, we can do a leadership one here, and we invite our clients.
Yes,
But
yes,
and Black clients who love the Enneagram.
yes, yes.
We all invite like 5 Black clients to be here. I think
Do
it'll
you know
be,
why the Enneagram and psychology is important for those who have been othered?
tell us your view.
It's because it sort of helps to decipher the code of racism.
Say more.
So in the end, by understanding human behavior, I am most likely to survive as an other person in society. Not only survive, but prosper. Because I know how to deal with people of different persuasions and different types. So as a leader, it helped me to understand human behavior before I became a coach.
So
As a professional, it helped me to move from the world of zeros and ones in engineering to come to the world of heads, hearts, and guts. So when you're privileged, that doesn't matter because you've got privilege. But if you want to be, you know that you are part of the out group, you need to know how the world works so that you can be great.
that would like navigating corporate environments, different types of bosses, not being in. I've seen that actually. I worked with a Black woman who was very, very intimidated by a certain quite stereotypical Enneagram 8 Afrikaner from the apartheid. and it was 6 plus racism plus projections of dangerous authority figure. And the Enneagram really helped her to get in her inner authority, recognize her power, shrink him down to just a vulnerable 8 little boy in there, and situation changed.
Exactly. Because you get to ask different questions, you get to respond differently. So you sort of unsettle them because your response is not the same of a typical oppressed and other person. You respond as an equal, which is what I've been encouraging my daughter to respond from, not as a Black woman who has got intersectionality meeting at her body.
Yeah. Just someone using the Enneagram, so someone just shows up with inner authority and gravity and confidence.
Yes. Both my son and my daughter, they know their Enneagram types, they know their gifts to the world, and they know their blind spots. And they're still learning because it's necessary for them. It's not a luxury.
I think you could get the whole world to come to a workshop if you said, come and understand your difficult boss and how to get along with them. I mean, when people come to therapy, half the time they're talking about their psychopathic boss or their ditzy boss or their, disorganized or projective. And you're really saying, give them something to come, give them an Enneagram reading or whatever it is, not we need you to support us, so we're going to support you. Yeah.
Good.
Thanks, Nancy. And thanks, Good News. I know we've gone a little over time. Thank you for your generosity, giving us extra time. We'll be sending out the recording and your slides with your permission and anything else that you'd like.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Good. And then I'll add 2 more slides.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Ing?
Thanks. Good. I'm just reading the comments. Amina, thank you. Amazing. Such compassion and passion about a more integrative and inclusive future, living with hope.
Oh.
And Nyla, you're in Zim. I didn't know that.
I'm coming to Zim.
Good news. When are you coming? That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. I'll make time. I promise I'll make time.
Has evolved a little bit more than South Africa on the racial issues, and we don't say black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And children are taught from a very young age, it's not black and white. It's either is the skin peach or is it brown?
Peach.
Beautiful.
Don't talk about black and white. So I think we've evolved a bit more on the racial side, but good news, can I organize a stadium for you?
Certainly. The Independence Stadium in Harare.
That was just, I found that session absolutely amazing. I don't know if it's because you're a fellow African, but it was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You had a good head start in Zimbabwe, so we are behind.
Yes, you are, but still lots of work to do here.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Let's promote this peach and brown thing. Hey, what do you think? Does it work for you?
Certainly.
Let's test it. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and thanks for the feedback and questions. Isabel, is there anything you want to say? You've been quiet in the background.
No, it was just very interesting. Thank you so much.
And thank
I'm
you.
not a coach. I'm not a coach, so it's just for my own fun that I'm listening.
You're just an individual Enneagram student.
Yes.
On path.
Thanks, Ingrid, for organizing the session and for the idea. It's been very enriching. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, see you
All
soon.
right. Thank you.
Next month is Bee Chestnut.
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah.
she's my guru.
Yeah.